people ask if I was going to cry, and I said, no, I'm not going to do it, because it hasn't hit me all this time, and my mom's boo-hooing over there. That doesn't help at all. But, it's okay. It's okay. You don't want me to get started. When I first, my mom asked me, goodness, probably over a year ago, if I would, when she was making preparations for this day, because she knew it would come someday. And I told her no at that time. I didn't know how I could get up here and do this. And honestly, I still don't know how, except that I'm just gonna, what I want to do to share with you today is what the Lord has taught myself these last 3 years, through my dad and through my son, some lessons he's taught me. And the only way I know that I can be up here is because of his grace. Amen. And I hope this day that you would know his grace if you don't. I know my dad would so desire that. Many of you probably know, but in 2009, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. That diagnosis occurred roughly about 3 weeks after my family had just moved overseas, halfway around the world in Asia, to serve the Lord. As you can imagine, I, along with the rest of my family, was shocked. By all our accounts, my dad looked pretty healthy on the outside. I had just seen him 3 weeks before, and that he looked fine. In the months that followed, my dad received treatment, and the cancer disappeared. Everything seemed to be better until around the summer of 2010. This time his cancer returned, and it was worse. Shortly after this time, my wife and I discovered that our youngest son, Micah, would be diagnosed with cancer. A different cancer, but a very bad cancer. Immediately we returned to the States. We came here to Orlando to be close to my mother and my father, who was in the hospital at that time, and for my son to receive surgery for the tumor. So the question is, why would I share this? It's because for some reason in the mysteries of God, I would walk this journey with both my dad and my son at the same time. I would experience the ugly disease called cancer. My world would forever change. It is a reality my father experienced, my mother has experienced, my siblings, my wife, my children, my relatives, and many of you have experienced. There's nothing beautiful about cancer. But it is in the midst of this reality, something so deadly, that we have seen God. It is in this desert that God has brought our family closer together. It is in this experience that a son was able to see his dad in a whole new light and learn some valuable life lessons that I will never forget. And today, while I could give you all of my dad's life, I want to share with you 3 lessons that I've learned in these last few years through my dad's journey. And I hope they will speak to you this morning. I want to read from 2 Corinthians 4, a passage that I think speaks well to my father. 2 Corinthians 4, beginning in verse 7, Paul writes, "But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, so that the surpassing greatness of the power will be of God and not from ourselves. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not despairing, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying about in the body the dying of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our body.
And then in verse 16, therefore we do not lose heart. But though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day. For momentary light affliction is producing for us eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. While we look not at the things which are seen, but on the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. And then in Philippians 1:21, another passage written by Paul, he writes, for to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I am to live on in the flesh, this will mean fruitful labor for me, and I do not know which to choose. But I am hard pressed from both directions, having the desire to depart and to be with Christ. For that is very much better. Yet to remain on in the flesh is more necessary for your sake. I just thought, from the lessons I've gleaned from my father, these passages spoke to what I've learned from him in these past few years. First thing I've learned, and this has been my whole life with my father and my mother, but the importance of Christ. You could say we were raised in church practically. I mean, from 2 years old, my parents drug me to church and took me to church. I was there all the time. But they instilled in us the importance of Christ. And my father, I saw through my father's life a man that, sure, he had his mistakes and his problems, but he was a man who always, the older he got, the more he fell in love with Christ. The more he wanted people to know about Christ. The more he became concerned for his children and his grandchildren. In fact, during the time of cancer, my dad would, I don't remember before cancer that many times where I saw my father cry. He was what you would say a man's man. You don't show tears. And I was the boo-hooing boy in the family, so that was always hard because I didn't see that. But when cancer, God softened my dad's heart. And it was so weird. The first time, and my dad just crying. I just don't know how to explain it. And he was crying about certain family members, certain people that he knew that he wanted to see come know Christ. That's a memory that I'll never, ever forget. Why could my dad be like that? I believe, like Paul says in Philippians 1:21, for to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. What do those words mean? Simply, I'll explain it like this. If money is your life, then death is lost. If possessions are your life, then death is lost. If your spouse is your life, then death is lost. Fill in that blank. If anything is your life besides Christ, then death is lost. But if Christ is your life, death is gain. Death is gain. People so often, I get this all the time. My dad got it, my parents. They go, I don't know how you all do this. I don't know how you carry on with a son with cancer. And my life is Christ. Amen. It's like Paul said, I'm hard pressed. I know that this life is not all there is. There's something far better. But at the same time, I have loved ones that I don't want to leave here. So it's that constant struggle. But I have hope. And my father, he had hope. And that hope was Christ. I want to challenge you today with a question. Do you know Christ? Seems like a simple question. I'm sure many would say, yeah, I know Christ. Mm-hmm. But I didn't say, do you know about Christ? do you know Christ?
Amen.
I grew up in church. I quoted a lot of verses. I knew a lot about Christ. But knowing about Christ won't get you any closer to Christ. You see, every religion in the world is knowledge about something. It's about, if you do this, this is what will make you right before this deity or this greater being. But the thing about Christianity, it's not about how much you know. It's about who you know.
Amen.
It's about a relationship. And that's why some of you have been touched by my father in the midst of his cancer, because of that relationship with Christ. Don't make the mistake of thinking your knowledge is what it is. It's relationship. There is a Christ who did everything that you could not do. He lived a perfect life in your place. He knew all the mistakes you would make, and he did what you could not do. He died in your place so that you could know the Father.
Amen.
Think about that. Think about a son having a dad who would love him so much to do that. That's what God did for you. My dad instilled in me the importance of Christ. And in these last few years, I saw that even more. Second, the purpose of pain. We hear questions all the time, all the why questions. Trust me, I've asked them plenty of times myself. But something my dad taught me, instead of focusing so much on the why, because if you focus on the why, you'll just always be in discouragement, to focus on the who.
Amen.
During these final months, my dad more than once, he talked about his suffering existing for the glory of God. Now, again, as a son growing up, my dad talked about God, but hearing him say this is for his glory. And in fact, many times he would say, Pastor Brooks preached some message about this being for God's glory, and he would share the whole message with me. And so, in fact, he even talked about the passage on the blind man from John. And as a son, man, going through what I was going through and hearing my dad say that, just a reminder, it is for his glory. You know, I may never understand all the whys, and that's okay. But I do know this. I know God's word is true. I know God loves me. And like the Apostle Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 4, that his affliction was producing for him a far more eternal glory. And I chose that passage because it said this momentary affliction. Cancer is just a momentary affliction. As ugly as it may seem, it's just a momentary affliction. It'll end. And if you know Christ, there's an eternal way, 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 way better than that thing of cancer. Another passage, Paul writes, My grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. My dad, through this journey, realized that even though he didn't want that cancer to be there, even though he still wanted to be here today, he believed there was another reason for it. And that's so Christ could be shown through him. How about you? How do you view pain and suffering? Is it something to be avoided at all costs? Or do you see it as something for God's grace to be displayed? Pain is a reality. If you live, you're going to experience pain. Some of you may be walking through cancer, some of you will. But one thing's inevitable, you will walk through pain and you will die. It's guaranteed. Do you know Christ in it? And can you say that this pain is just momentary? There's something far more better. Finally, the lesson I've learned from my dad is the importance of perspective. Through this journey of cancer, my dad has taught me the importance of focusing on the eternal. When the eternal is the focus, the things in this life take a different perspective. People are seen differently. Possessions are seen differently. More than once, my dad told me how he was praying for certain friends and family members to know Christ. Cancer, in a way, began to change my dad's perspective. And it's through this journey that my dad sought to mend relationships with people and family. My dad loved his wife, my mother. He loved Jonathan and Tara, Patty and David. He loved me. He loved our spouses, his grandchildren. He loved the people he came in contact with at the dialysis clinic, at the hospital, even sometimes those nurses that would rub him the wrong way. He still loved them. And he wanted them to know Christ. You see, when you know Christ, when you know that this affliction is just momentary and it's working something far more greater in you, your perspective changes. This world is just temporary. You focus on what really matters, and that's the eternal. If my dad was here today, I know he would say, hey, it's worth it. It's real. It's real. In fact, my dad today, there's no more pain. There's no more crying. In fact, he's there with his father who came to know Christ before he died. His mother who prayed for him endlessly to come to know Christ. And he's there with his daughter, Summer, who by the world standards couldn't do much, but she's running around.
Amen.
He's there with her today. My prayer, my desire, I plead you. Know Christ. There is hope. There is peace. There is joy in Christ. My dad knew that, and he has taught his son that. And I pray if you don't know that, ask someone, ask myself, ask Pastor Brooks, Paul, my mother, anyone, just ask someone. I know I would love for you to experience that too.